Hello, NWI. Welcome to Bluer by the Lake, the podcast that explores region life through a blue lens. I'm your host, Tracy Martin, and joining us today are Haley Boer, Indiana State Director of the Planned Parenthood Alliance Advocates, and Sue Eleuterio, longtime region women's rights activist and former board member of Planned Parenthood. Haley, Sue, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us, Tracy. I'm so excited to be here.
Alrighty. So, this is a question I'm going to get to both of you with that because one of the things that I have found the most delightful about doing this podcast is that the people that I talk to, the work they're doing, the stories of how they got into it and their commitment to it, when you just talk to them, you just kind of want to jump in and do it with them. So, Sue, let's start with you. It's really fun times being a woman in the region in 2025. Yeah, that's how many years we've been. Okay. So take us back to when you first started this work. How does the landscape here in NWI today compare to what it was when you first started working for women's rights?
That's an interesting question. Well, I'm a boomer, and
Oh.
I guess my first thing about women's rights is that I was really good at running, and in the I graduated from high school in 1970. In the 60s, Title IX had not happened. And I wanted to run, so I went to the boys' track team coach because we didn't have a girls' track team. And I asked him if I could run, and he said yes. He was a amazing guy because he was a Vietnam vet and probably somewhat conservative, but he loved running. And so I joined the boys' track team. I was the only girl for 2 years, and then I got another girl to come out. And then and by my senior year, we had a relay team, and we actually ran in the Penn relays in Philly. We got our butts kicked, but I did win the county meet in the 440. So, that was, I guess, a message to me that I think one of the things about the late 60s and the early 70s is there were rules that impacted women or customs, but we didn't understand that we couldn't challenge them, frankly. So sometimes we did challenge them, and sometimes we had good results, and that was a good result. In terms of Planned Parenthood, when I went to college, all the senior girls in my dorm told me that I needed to get on birth control, and they took me to Planned Parenthood.
Rite of
I
passage.
didn't have a doctor, and so I will say that I loved my mother, who is now deceased, but she was a practicer of rhythm, and my youngest brother was born when I was 16, and so I had very strong evidence of what could happen if you had unprotected sex.
Yes, it's called an October surprise, folks.
Yes, he was born in October. How did you know that? And he was 3 months premature. I mean, he was yeah, I could hold him in the palm of my hand, and he
And it was
and
probably a hard pregnancy for your mom,
it
too,
was very
because you were
hard because
older.
she had
Yeah.
gone my mom, because my dad was amazing, because he encouraged her. My mom went back and was in the middle of getting a PhD when she found out she was pregnant at
Oh,
38 with her 6th kid.
sorry.
So I had a lot of lessons about, trying to think about planning for
Mm-hmm.
Planned Parenthood. Um, so that was when I got involved with Planned Parenthood, and when I got pregnant with my oldest child, who was, wanted and wished for, I still didn't have a doctor because, we were young, didn't have a lot of money, and I went to Planned Parenthood to find out that I was pregnant. So, I think sometimes people don't understand that it is Planned Parenthood. And for me, it's been a really valuable resource. And so that cemented my commitment to Planned Parenthood. And then, um, frankly, Indiana's one of Indiana's former director, who's no longer with us, sadly, Betty, came to me and asked me to be involved with the board. And honestly, I didn't understand how much Planned Parenthood needed financial support from individuals. And um, so I learned a lot because in my mind, they just were there forever and they were fine. And, I didn't understand the financial challenges. So I became a board member and was very proud to do that, and learned a lot about the challenges that we're still facing with Planned Parenthood in Indiana.
So, Haley, what brought you into this work?
Yeah, I was a freshman at Butler. I was going to school thinking I wanted to be a physician, which I started as a bio major, and then I took a world religion class of all things.
Hmm.
And my religion professor, who is kind of instrumental in like my vocational path today, but he told me about this hospital in rural India that I could do an internship at, and I would, write a paper on like interreligious dialogue and be there for a couple months. So like working in a hospital setting, but kind of like taking a look around me at like the religious landscape.
Hmm.
Um, and again, going into this, like wanting to go into medicine at the time. But when I was in this hospital, it was a really rural hospital in the town of Mungeli, where the next hospital was like 100 kilometers away. And one of the most like common occurrences we saw were patients coming in that were pregnant, and they would, come in like in labor on a motorbike. To deliver their babies. But so many times I saw, women coming in that were younger than me on their fourth and fifth child, and they would ask for a tubal. And they had to get the permission of their husband or their in-laws for them to be able to have that procedure. Same with like access to birth control and wasn't accessible there, and they still had to get permission. Um, and then, later on when I was there towards the end, I was finding out that when they did, ultrasounds and whatnot, they wouldn't disclose the sex of the baby because they were worried if it was a girl child that they might try an early termination just because of inheritance law and things like that in India.
Yeah.
In particular in this place. So it just kind of opened my mind up to like the how political bodies can be and access to reproductive health care. And I'd always been kind of civically minded back home, but I never really thought about it in that way. So I came back to Indiana and I started looking at like what things are looking like here. And I was kind of shocked and stunned to see, in ways how our access was still as restricted. And so I changed my major when I got back to Butler, started studying political science and religion, um, and have been working to address access to sexual and reproductive health care ever since.
Well, that's wonderful. And we're happy that you're at it because we need all of the help we can get. Haley, I know your position gives you a global view of women's reproductive rights and healthcare access throughout the Midwest. Can you tell us how Indiana compares to other adjacent states in terms of women's reproductive rights and trans rights?
Yeah. Indiana is a lot more restrictive than a lot of our neighboring states. So we have an abortion ban in place with very, very narrow exemptions. But overall, it's a ban. And I think it's really important to call it that because some folks still think, oh, I'm 10 weeks or I'm 6 weeks. I'd like to get an abortion. You can't unless you fall in the parameters of serious risk to health or if you fall under the rape or incest exemption. So we do have a ban in our state, and folks that are looking for abortion care have to go to Illinois or Michigan or in some situations Ohio. Um, so obviously a lot more strict than many of our neighboring states. Indiana and I think Kentucky might be a little worse off than us, but have abysmal rates in terms of maternal health care and access to maternal health care. And that speaks to the general like climate that we have here. And if you get down to the bottom of that, we have healthcare deserts. We have places where they don't have access to sexual and reproductive health care, so they have to they travel far, and we know many folks kind of sideline that sort of care if it's hard to access. And same thing goes for care access for trans folks. We have a gender affirming care ban for minors in our state. Planned Parenthood is one of the larger providers of gender affirming care for adults in our state. So I always want to put that plug in for folks that don't know. Planned Parenthood in Indiana serves, I think it's around 6,000 patients, gender affirming care adults in our state. So, and we still have 10 health centers that are providing that care to folks. And virtual access as well for folks that need it too, to try to address some of those gaps in care. Um, But we're consistently seeing further attempts to restrict our access from the Indiana legislature and from executive orders via Governor Braun. So we fight as hard as we can to try to push proactive policies and defend against the harmful ones. But Indiana is a pretty restrictive state, and we're seeing young folks flee the state because of that.
All right, so we're going to talk about abortion a lot in this podcast, but I'm the parent of a trans kid, and I'm going to talk for about that for just a second. So, my kid was looking into surgical options right when that ban came through. And it was really, really fun parenting during that time because um, we live in NWI, and so I mean, I could walk to Illinois if I wanted to
Mm.
right now. And we always thought that because when we first moved here, Indiana was a moderate state. We're in a blue county. We're right next door to Chicago. We'll be fine. We'll be fine. But the fact of the matter is, I had appointments at clinics, all at some of the most no, some of the most respected institutions in Chicago. And one by one, boom, 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 they all canceled those appointments despite the fact that their governor had put out executive orders, protective orders for them. So they didn't mean damn to them.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can tell I'm still bitter about it. We cannot depend on hospitals. They slammed the doors in our face all through Chicagoland so fast that my hair blew back. I have zero faith in any of those institutions to take risks on their patients' behalf. So if we start seeing more coming out of this legislature, banning, criminalizing cross-state lines, information access, trying to prevent mifepristone. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Mifepristone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Mifepristone through the mail. Um, what options do you see next for Indiana women who are needing abortion care and trans care?
Yeah. Um, and I'm so sorry to hear about, having to access care during such a tough time. That's it's devastating and it impacts so many Hoosiers. Um, we will continue to see hostile legislation come across every session, I think, that are kind of tailored to that. Other states are seeing some of that trafficking language legislation, care trafficking, which is such a wild concept when you think about it. Um,
Let's pause there for a second. All right, guys, I'm going to get salty now. What the fuck?
you know,
It's right up
to
there with
access healthcare.
yeah, care trafficking. What am I trafficking?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
Yeah.
it reminds me of like prosperity gospel and it's just okay.
Yeah, I
No.
mean, it has folks afraid of, like, what apps they have on their phone. Like, if they have, period tracking apps on their phone and they, share like, their phone has access to their location and whatnot, like, folks are concerned that that is something that they're gonna look at and look towards. I mean, when states are talking about looking at, like, what's in your water and testing to see if you had any sort of, like, uh, abortion medication and the water sources. I mean, it's so intrusive onto our lives, which, you know, it's coming from like a party that's, without government interference, it's kind of shocking, is it not? How in the weeds they are to our lives.
it, well, because they only care about privacy when it's beneficial to them.
Yeah.
As we've seen from this current administration time and time and time and time again, they've just been emboldened to not even pretend that hypocrisy is something that they care about.
Yeah.
Um,
I think the one like piece of hope that a lot of us, hold on to is that we know that policies like trafficking or anything to further restrict access to our healthcare are not popular. We know it doesn't go over well. We know when it's put on as a constitutional amendment and folks get a chance to vote on it directly, we know that we win. We know what polling shows, and we know that restricting access to care is widely unpopular. And I think that's why a lot of the times we see some of this more hostile legislation be authored, but then it doesn't move. It for the most part doesn't get committee hearings. And I think that's because our super majority still understands that it's not popular with voters.
So, Sue, give me, all right, so let's paint a picture then of a young rape victim
Mm.
here in NWI. And she needs care. Where is she going to go?
Well, in some ways, we are back to the 60s. I mean, I hate to say it. You may have heard of the group in Chicago that used to provide underground access to abortions in the 60s. And
Are you talking about the Jane Network?
yes, right. And
Mm.
and sadly, in some ways, we've gone back 50 years. To where women have to think carefully about, as Haley said, how they even put personal information on their phones, which is outrageous. Um, it, and what I do think is good is that there is strong. I mean, Planned Parenthood is national. Um, there is a lot of support. Our chapter of Planned Parenthood is part of a group that's actually partly in the West Coast. Um,
Hmm.
and it's interesting when we do have conversations with our colleagues who are part of the the Planned Parenthood Alliance that Indiana is part of, because it's kind of shocking to some of them, right? Because they are in states where this seems like medieval times, frankly.
'Cause it is
Mm.
for the
Um,
lo
but I guess the good news is that, on the website, there is information about getting access to any kind of services that you need. The staff are trained to be confidential and to be supportive. When I volunteered as a clinic escort, um, I can't tell you, and we never asked for personal information, but I had people tell me that they had come 3 hours to get services, and that was within Indiana. So, I just think it's important to understand that the 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 strictures we're putting on people for what is, as Haley said, basic reproductive rights, basic access to health care. Um, but it is there. There are various ways to get support and get the help, and Planned Parenthood to me is one of the most trustworthy groups to ask for information.
well, they certainly, they know their way around, sensitive topics that are politicized. Haley, do you, or you too, Sue, for that matter, do you guys have any tips for people in these restrictive states in this digital age to safely search for options for themselves if they're exploring reproductive health care?
Yeah. And I still, Google and everything like that. But one thing too, like if you're in Indiana, you're in Northwest Indiana, you could go to either of our Northwest Indiana Health Center locations in Maryville or Hammond, and you can still have your pregnancy, get your pregnancy test there, have it confirmed. They can refer you through our patient navigation services over to a Chicago or Illinois health center, and then you can come back after you have the procedure or receive the medication abortion. In Illinois, you can come over and get your post care still from the Planned Parenthood in
Okay.
Hammond or in Maryville. So, we help try to navigate patients because people still come to our doors not realizing that we have a ban in place. So, we our patient navigation services are still happening, and that's one of the ways we try to make it as seamless as possible and easy as possible for folks to receive that kind of care. So when in doubt, I would still say, trust and call the Planned Parenthood in Indiana to help you get that care in Illinois or wherever else it may be.
And then once you've called them, all of the standard patient confidentiality issues come into play. So you're protected
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
seeking your information out in those sources. Okay,
Yeah.
great.
That's kind of one of the one things that I think we try to we're trying to do a better job of is kind of like shut down the falsehoods of what crisis pregnancy centers are, because your information is not being protected there. One, they're not a health care facility like Planned Parenthoods are, but we hear a lot of times of folks going to crisis pregnancy centers, and their information is not going to be confidential. They're not going to get those navigation services. But a lot of times people have a hard time figuring out which is which, or if it's a federally qualified health center or if it's a crisis pregnancy center.
So,
And
can you, Haley, go through that a little bit for those of you who I mean, when I hear the words crisis pregnancy center, I go, ugh, because I know what I'm
yeah,
gonna see on the wall, and it's gonna be a big giant cross and then, an aborted baby picture and all kinds of horrible things. Um,
yeah.
so can you walk through what those are and then tell people how they can pick an appropriate, safe place to seek reproductive care?
Yeah. And crisis pregnancy centers or fake clinics or CPCs, they're kind of getting harder to spot sometimes. Like in Bloomington, for example, they were just going door to door with handouts talking about the services they provide. And oftentimes it's talking about like counseling services and like pregnancy resources and things like that. Some of the language, if you kind of like stare at it, you're like, oh, this is coded a little bit. But the difference between, crisis pregnancy centers or fake clinics is they often don't have any sort of medical personnel at all. They're often ran by volunteers. A lot of the times they're trying to confirm a pregnancy and they don't have a licensed person to even do sonographers. Whereas if you're at a Planned Parenthood or another like federally qualified health center, you're going to be seeing a physician or a nurse practitioner or somebody that's able to give you actual medical health care, and they're going to be HIPAA compliant. So if you're trying to like look out for the difference, a Planned Parenthood gives you, in a federally qualified health center is going to give you like non-biased information with all of your options. A crisis pregnancy center is going to steer you into one direction. The information is going to be biased. It's not going to be medically accurate. It's going to be persuasive to a specific lane. Um, and unfortunately, crisis pregnancy centers in the biennium and in the 2-year budget receive almost $7 million in state funding, which is wild. Is absolutely wild when you think about
Oh.
it. So oftentimes they're going to be right next to a Planned Parenthood or another federally qualified health center. And they're often going to be pink
Yeah.
or purple or called a women's care center or something like that. So
Yeah.
um, if
And they have
somebody,
like a Zen aspect to them. It's not overtly religious,
yeah,
but that's what we're talking about, right? These are religiously affiliated or religiously run institutions with the goal of preventing an abortion and pushing a woman into having a baby and then either keeping the baby or giving it up for adoption.
yeah, absolutely. So when you're doing your research, look for something that's a federally qualified health center or where you're going to be getting care from medical experts that are going to give you accurate information.
Or here's an even better one: go to Planned Parenthood or go to your doctor.
Absolutely.
Right. And as a mother of 4, a happy mother of 4 and grandmother of 5, I want to say that the other thing that bothers me about the crisis centers is that they're focused on one end goal, but not on supporting a a woman and her family. They're not they don't really care about, I'm sorry, but they don't really care about a woman and her family. They care about an end result. And as you said, there's a lot of focus on, you know, smiling babies, but babies come in all kinds of health situations and women come in all kinds of health situations. And as someone who got pregnant using 2 forms of birth control, and I love them dearly, when my daughter was 6 months old with twins, I love my boys dearly, but, it takes a lot to raise 3 kids born in a year plus a toddler, and not
Holy
everybody.
cannoli.
Yeah, and not
Wow,
everybody.
Sue.
Yeah,
Oh
and
my
not
god,
ev
I almost had a heart attack for you right now.
well, what I always say is I don't remember the '80s, and it's not for the same reason other people don't remember. But and they are the best thing that ever happened to me, but nonetheless, I was fortunate. I had family support. At the time, I had a husband. Um, I financially was okay, but a lot of people are not in that position, and so no one else should be making those decisions except you and your family. And the problem with crisis pregnancy is that they're pushing, as Haley said, they're pushing one option without any regard for whatever else is going on in your life.
Well, let's spend a minute there. I'm glad that we've gone in this direction because um it's really competing with babies is a hard narrative.
Mm.
Um I'm a mom, Sue, you're a mom, and our entire species, it's literally built into our DNA to elevate the creation and veneration and growth of infants above anything else. That's how our species has survived. And babies are fabulous. Um, like I said, there's a reason why we are so primed to feel that gut urge to care for them, and any threat to babies is instantly the winner in any sort of issue that you might be facing. So when you stack, and unfortunately, now the way the abortion debate is being framed, it's women versus babies. And because of that, I mean, women lose. It's hard to really put a face to the struggles of a woman who needs to have either an abortion or other care or prevent further pregnancies or anything like that. When you've got for lack of a better term for it, a dead baby on the other. So
Well, let's just clarify something because
yeah, let's do that.
we're not talking about babies. We're talking about a fetus, which is not a viable baby. And we are misleading people when we even use the term baby in this context. This is not a baby. And I'm the daughter of two scientists, and my mother was a Roman Catholic. And at the same time, my mother did genetic counseling for folks. And what my mother believed very strongly that, and this is her faith, that God wouldn't have allowed abortion if God didn't think sometimes there was a need for it. So, this whole positionality of that it's babies is wrong. It's not about babies. It's about families. It's about people having the option to have a healthy family and have the resources to have a healthy family and not be put on the spot by someone who, again, doesn't know anything about them and their situation.
So let's talk about Haley. You jump in here, please, if you don't
Well, I
mind.
hope that was okay, but that's
No,
Yeah.
it's
let's just say
wonderful.
that's my opinion, not
That's
necessarily
exactly
the
what we need to
opinion of
hear.
Planned Parenthood.
Because you're right. They're using the language babies and pictures of pink-cheeked babies chewing on things peacefully for a reason. It's resonant and it's deceptive. And it's not focused on the stories that are more important, the woman who is going to be bearing that baby. So let's
Yeah.
talk about what kind of women are seeking out abortions.
Yeah. Everyone. I mean, you likely know somebody in your life that's had an abortion for a variety of different reasons. And I think through abortion bans, one of the things that's forgotten is that miscarriage care and abortion are synonymous. And now we're seeing women die because they can't access life-saving health care, which is abortion. I mean, it because of the narrative that Sue so like eloquently laid out is like we're not talking about abortion, we're not talking about like these fully formed babies with pink cheeks like you said. I mean, pregnancy is dangerous. And many pregnancies end up resulting in miscarriage or needing abortion care. And that's a big population of folks that are accessing that sort of care. Of course, that are folks that are are seeking that care because of an unintended pregnancy or because the circumstances of life make it so that they don't want to have a baby at that moment in time. Many times, folks that are having an abortion already have children or will have children later on, but they can't financially sustain their families or they're in a situation of domestic violence, and so their safety is in jeopardy by continuing with the pregnancy. I mean, there's a host of issues of why folks receive this care, but now in a state like Indiana and what we're seeing in Texas and across the board in states with bans is now pregnant people's health and safety are in jeopardy because of these abortion bans.
So let's go there for a minute too now. So I know that abortion restrictions can have cascading impacts. Doctor shortages for one of them. Hey, are we seeing an exodus of OBGYNs and trans doctors in NWI? I mean, and Indiana as a whole?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And they've been talking about it. They've been talking about it for a while because of our restrictive care here. And now it feels like they're screaming it from rooftops because it's harder to train here. There's less jobs here because we have maternity wings closing and we've got hospital closing and like exasperating care deserts. But folks are going to other states to be trained, and why come back in a state like Indiana where your license could be put in jeopardy, where you have to consult the legal experts of your hospital entity before you even provide care. And so that's kind of what folks have to make that choice. Like, why practice in Indiana where they might end up losing their license when they could provide somewhere else and not put their livelihoods in jeopardy that way. So we're absolutely seeing that as a cascade event because of this. Also, physicians and OBGYNs that are graduating from medical school, a lot of them are also in the stage of their life where they might be starting families. And why choose to come in a state here where they don't feel like their pregnancies might be safe? Um, so I mean, when you talk about competition and the brain drain and everything that we those talking points we typically hear when they're talking about the economic future of Indiana, that's a forgotten argument that only it feels like a few of us are chiming as loud as we can, but that forgotten about when they talk about trying to keep talent in Indiana.
Yeah, letting women bleed out in parking lots because they're miscarrying and the ER doctor can't get the lawyer on the phone isn't necessarily a great look for any state. And it's also not really, oh my God, I can't. I just want to go here because I want to. It's not a great look for the pronatalist bandwagon folks, which is for, the new. For those of you who don't know what this is, it's a new philosophy, and it has the same roots as the lovely trad wife trend. Women should stay home and have lots of babies and stay home with them in order to reverse population declines. But again, if you are a young woman and you're considering having babies and then you hear about these things happening, you have to think twice. Have we heard or seen evidence? I know it's kind of a newer thing, of women who have stopped having children because of these restrictive abortion and healthcare policies towards women.
Yeah, I mean, and anecdotally, like it's a conversation in all my friend groups of not
Mhm.
knowing whether they're going to stay here. Because I mean,
Yep.
for context, I'm 31. I'm recently engaged. It's a conversation that my partner and I have, all of my friends and their partners are having. Like, do we feel safe to have pregnancies here? Do we want to stay here? Or is it something that we want to consider altogether? And a lot of, it's a trend that we're seeing in a lot of folks that are, young professionals. And I guess this is something we haven't like covered yet, but it's so expensive to have kids anyways in general, always has been. But in a state like Indiana where childcare is so inaccessible for most people, um, we're talking about the pronatalist movement having more babies and everything, but like folks can't afford to have babies. Healthcare costs are astronomical. Medicaid is being cut. Like the waiver list is extraordinary. Healthcare subsidies or childcare subsidies are being cut. No true family paid leave programs. I mean, it's abysmal. Like if we want folks to be comfortable having more children, then shouldn't we support that or pass some policies that are pro family or whatever they want to say? But we don't have that here. We don't see that here. We don't
Well,
even see them passing, proactive maternal health care legislation.
And I gotta jump in because there's also a tragic disparity in Indiana, which is that the Black maternal health rate is terrible. We have one of the worst Black maternal health rates in the country. So again, if you're pro-natalism and you support people having babies, what about these mothers who are at risk and increasingly at risk And there's absolutely nothing, there's been no legislation, no effort to support these moms, to make sure that their pregnancies are okay. And that's an embarrassment for the state.
And
It,
unhealthy babies, when they come out, they need additional care. And that's more on the state because a lot of if you're having a very unhealthy pregnancy, chances are, and you're not able to get maternal health services, it's likely because you have gaps in your health coverage. Um,
Mhm.
Haley, let's talk a little bit about clinic shortages and healthcare deserts and how Planned Parenthood is going to fit into that. Because I know with the ACA subsidies about to expire, I know we cannot guarantee that the political machinations are going to go through in the way that we want, and Indiana is making Medicaid so much more difficult. What are your projections for the state if both of those political trains keep going off the track, both the Medicaid cuts in Indiana and the ACA cuts?
Yeah. So like briefly and like broadly speaking, not from Planned Parenthood, I'll dive into that a little bit more specifically in a second. But um we already know care is so hard to access, and you have extremely long wait times. We've got, it's hard to access care in general. And I think a lot of people are extremely, extremely worried. Um the astronomical cost of healthcare now, I even our plan, I think, went up 22%, which is criminal, and thankfully, Planned Parenthood is covering that increasing cost for staff. But I mean, what are the typical families supposed to do when their healthcare cost is jumping that much and there's wait lists on Medicaid? But um, I digress. We're causing these huge disparities of folks that are going to be able to afford care and folks that are not going to be able to afford care. And I think it's just going to completely widen the disparities we already have, in the disappearing middle class. But what makes me nervous with my Planned Parenthood hat on is, I don't think most people know or realize, but when the federal budget bill passed, the big beautiful bill, although we use other words when we're referring to it, but that
Partial,
had
right?
a yeah, that had a Medicaid defund for Planned Parenthood specifically. So since early October, we Planned Parenthood is no longer able to accept Medicaid, which for us is pretty devastating. So we see around 35,000 patients annually in Indiana alone, and about 1 in 3 of our patients are Medicaid patients. Um, so not only is it devastating for our patients who in some places, and a huge shout out to the Legacy Foundation in Northwest Indiana, but for Hammond and Maryville, we have some grant funding currently around $30,000 that kind of helps us cover some of that gap. So if a Medicaid patient goes to one of those health centers, we're not able to bill their Medicaid, but we have some grant funding to subsidize the cost of their visits for whatever care they're receiving. Um, but that means that some of those patients are no longer going to be able to go to Planned Parenthood, or they'll have to pay out of pocket or use some of that grant funding. They might no longer be able or go to a Planned Parenthood. Will they be able to receive care elsewhere in their community, or are they going to have to try to drive a couple counties over to receive care? Are they going to be able to get in a timely fashion, or are they going to have to wait, 6 months now to get their Pap smear? Or are they going to skip that visit altogether and try to wait it out, and lose access to that preventative care that we know is so crucial and so important? So because of the ACA subsidies, because of the Medicaid defund and the Title X defund, as well, where I fear that we're going to see an increase in unintended pregnancies, an increase in STI rates. We're going to see folks not receive that preventative care, and in the end, we know that all of those things cost the state more money. Not only are they devastating and detrimental to families, but it's going to cost the state more money in the long run. Um, so it's it's a mess. It's a mess,
It
Tracy.
sounds like it. Um, and one thing that I know from work with the LGBTQ community, um, I know that they have really all the nonprofits that service that community are really struggling right now, um, because it's no longer politically expedient to support, particularly for corporate donors. Um, I know Planned Parenthood National has struggled with funding. Are you guys still in that boat? And if so, how is that impacting the services you can provide?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Medicaid, losing Medicaid for us is absolutely huge. So it's crucial right now that we have, the corporate, the grants that I mentioned with Legacy Foundation. We have a couple of other of those, but that we have, personal support from individual donors as well. Because when you make a donation to Planned Parenthood, our PPGNHIK, our C3 organization, like you're providing access to healthcare. You're filling that gap that we are now a huge gap that we are now missing. So I mean, our development team is trying to fill that gap, but that gap is huge. So it's obviously in crisis in a um, of concern. We have 10 health centers still in Indiana, and we're doing everything we can to keep all of our doors open, but we're in survival mode.
Mm.
Um, and one of like the call to actions that we give folks, like even if you're not in a position to donate to the organization um or whatnot, but use your private health insurance at Planned Parenthood too. That's a great way to support your local Planned Parenthood.
Ah.
Um,
Okay, well, let's stop there for a second. So what other so I am my baby growth days are done. Um, what what can the average person go and do that maybe would even surprise you that you wouldn't realize as a service that Planned Parenthood can provide for you?
Yep. I don't think a lot of folks know that you can go to Planned Parenthood for your like annual wellness visit and get your pap smear. I think
I
that goes
didn't.
over a lot of yeah, that goes over a lot of folks' head, but that's where I get I have my annual visit and do my pap smear. So besides like birth control, STI testing, gender affirming care, kind of the normal things you think about for Planned Parenthood, you can get your annual visit and get your pap smear done too. We're expanding into menopausal care, so that's
Hmm.
something that, breaches different generations. And then we also do vasectomy in Indiana, which we actually launched, I believe it would have been last Valentine's Day, which is a
Hmm.
little ironic. Valentine's Day can come get,
No, that's
snipped at
good
Planned Parenthood,
marketing.
right? But those are some of the other services we provide, but some of that preventative care. If you have a UTI, you can go to Planned Parenthood and get your UTI confirmed to get treatment there.
Okay.
And we also have like telehealth. So if there's any concerns or anything like that that are related to your sexual and reproductive health, you can hop on a telehealth visit and get it taken care of. And for me personally, right when I started at Planned Parenthood, my OBGYN became a hospitalist somewhere and it was part of a mass exodus out of another healthcare provider. And so I just immediately switched my care over. Now I get my annual done at Planned Parenthood every year.
That's awesome.
And then one of the things that we're even excited about for folks that are still on birth control is we're now doing some pain management care with IUD insertion, so some local anesthetic and because I mean it's crazy that we're now just getting to a place that we know that this causes extreme pain for some people and we're addressing that. So come get a, a nearly pain-free IUD insertion at your local Planned Parenthood.
Well, I think it's really great. And so everybody knows I'll be posting links to make an appointment and these tips, links to donate, um, and links to make an appointment. Sue, before we start, talking about other things people can do in NWI, give me a sense of what you think's going to happen here in the region should, the worst happen and our clinics close.
Well, as Haley said, I mean, we're talking about negative health outcomes. We're talking about a sicker population, a less healthy population, and that eventually is going to have an impact on the region and on the state. I mean, it's just a matter of of sensibility. And one of the things that makes me a little crazy about people who, don't want to, for instance, pay taxes is if you don't support institutions like Planned Parenthood, like public libraries, like, then you're worse off for it. And the last thing I want to say that I've been involved with, and I think I forgot to write this to you, Tracy, is
Mm,
I've been very involved with the advocacy part of Planned Parenthood. So I've
mm,
served on the advocacy committee for several years now. We actually do a questionnaire with candidates running for office. And if they can
mm.
answer those questions in a way that supports Planned Parenthood can endorse them. So that's an opportunity for people that doesn't, it takes time, not money. So if people are thinking about, well, gee, I'd like to help, but I don't have a lot of money to donate, advocacy work is really, really important for Planned Parenthood.
Especially now.
Hmm.
Um, Because just a reminder to everybody listening, I know it's probably preaching to the choir at this point, but Indiana is, there's a reason why they're really, 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 really struggling to get Republicans in the state to agree to a redistricting because they know that Indiana is far more purple than anybody would think. And
Right.
it's just one bad decision away from flipping. And we're getting really close. So, this would be a really great way. If you have somebody you know who's running, you can encourage them to go through the process to get Planned Parenthood endorsement. So I will be posting links to all of that stuff. So, Haley, Sue, what are, besides those things we've mentioned, are there any other ways people can help and get involved?
Yeah, if folks are interested in doing volunteer work with the Planned Parenthood in Northwest Indiana in our Hammond or Maryville location, one way that we have folks engage with us is doing patient advocacy programs. So that might be tabling in the health center and asking folks to engage with Planned Parenthood besides just being a patient. So share their story with us, where we might use that. When we're speaking with legislators or different things, or engage with us by being a volunteer for prides. We participated in 13 prides around the state this past summer with our very, very small team that we have now. So table with us in a health center. You can, sign up with me to do that. Volunteer with us for the pride season. Oftentimes we do healthy neighborhood canvases. So we'll go door to door in a neighborhood around one of our health centers to let folks know about our healthcare services. Also trying to, combat some of that rhetoric they might see from crisis pregnancy centers. Um, and then you can engage with us during the legislative session or the electoral season, like Sue mentioned as well. So right now, I don't know if many folks saw, but earlier today, the Senate announced that they are going to reconvene early for
Yep.
redistricting. That was announced, a few hours ago at like noon or 1 p.m. today. But
God, make up your mind.
yeah, so we'll be participating in the rally at the State House on December
Mhm.
1st, which kicks off our session early. So we always need folks to help us in lobbying their elected official about proactive legislation like our momnibus package that will be up for a second year in a row that, unfortunately died without a committee hearing. But we need folks from across the state to engage with us in a variety of different ways. And so whether you're more interested in the healthcare side of things, you can volunteer with us in a health center or legislative advocacy or, with our political action committee and hopefully getting some pro sexual and reproductive health candidates elected too.
Sue, any thoughts about things people can do in NWI?
I think everything that Haley said. We are doing a fundraiser up here, so I can send you information about that. Um, uh, and we're always looking for opportunities to do fundraisers, as Haley said, or table. Um, one of the things I always like to do is go to the colleges because we like to get folks um, an opportunity for an education early. Um, and I think that again, I think that for people like me, if you find out about Planned Parenthood when you're 18 or 19 or 20 or 21, they really can be a lifelong support for you. So,
Because it can change your life.
yeah,
Because then you'll have an option where you
yeah,
might not have known before that you had one.
right.
So, Haley, Sue, if you could say one last thing to the people listening to this, what would you want it to be? Sue, why don't you go first?
I think as Haley said that just take a look at Planned Parenthood and understand that that there's so many different services that, um, people tend to get focused on one thing, and it really is an all around health access. An education program, and I think that's so invaluable, especially these days when there's so much disinformation out there about health, and it can be very confusing, and to know that you have a trusted source, I think is really invaluable.
Haley?
Yeah, I would say use this holiday season to talk to your friends and family and the people in your world um, about not just about Planned Parenthood, but about the current status of access to healthcare in our state. I know there's a million things going on in the world right now that you hear in every news cycle, but now's not the time to have your head buried in the sand. We're moving into a really important election year, and folks should be educated and informed when they're going to the ballot box. And they should know what their elected officials care about at a state level and nationally. So to just stay informed and keep talking about it because it's something we should all care about.
Well, I give you a double amen to that, folks. That's a wrap for today. Just as a reminder, I'll be posting links to ways you can help, donate, all the creative ideas that Haley and Sue brought up today. And in the meantime, I wish everyone tasty turkey, perfect mashed potatoes, and maybe the first ice shelf of the year at the lake. I know. But it's so beautiful. If you've never seen an ice shelf form at Lake Michigan, it's just amazing because it looks like a lunar landscape. It's so anyway. Well, and either way, everyone have a peaceful holiday, and hopefully I'll see you up at the lake sometime.
Thanks,
Bye.
Chelsea.